Hello and welcome to The SLAB. I'm Angie.
And I'm Nathan.
And we're here to talk about all things videographer. Whether you're starting out or a longtime professional, this podcast is here for you. You can view the video version of this podcast on youtube.com/@slabvisuals. And if you're already watching us, you can always stream it on your favorite streaming device.
Your favorite podcast
app.
Mm-hmm. Yep. While you're repainting your fence or repainting your house or
cleaning your kitchen,
repainting your car.
When have you painted anything lately? What is with the repainting?
This office.
Oh yeah, I guess we did.
Yeah.
Well, hi. We're glad you're here. We're coming from the Inland Northwest, based out of Spokane, Washington. We have a small video production company. We work nationwide, but we have the privilege of living in Spokane, beautiful city.
Yeah.
So,
and today we're going to talk about video editing, and specifically video editing software. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons and kind of, our experiences in our editing workflow.
Yeah. And in all fairness, it's mostly Nathan's experiences. I'm pretty new to the editing world, but we'll get into that. So thank you for joining us. So when you're first getting started in editing, right, you need to know what your options are, right? Editing software is a tool, and you want the best tool for the work that you're going to do. It could either really hinder you or it can really give you a lot of options.
Yeah. And when you're capturing video, you're going to get to a point where you get those phone videos and you're like, I really want to do more with them rather than just chop them up in a reel, know? And so that's where you get into the realm of, adding music and audio and different sound effects and stuff like that. And so when you get into that heavier editing, you're going to be looking for editing software out there. And there's a couple that are kind of geared towards social media, and a couple of those are programs like CapCut, I think is probably the most famous one. iMovie's out there, Movavi, Filmora are just a couple.
And those template editors are really wildly different than the more robust heavy hitters that are professional editing platforms. Now, those templates are great for people like me that are just like maybe trying to put some content out on social media or just barely dipping my toes into what video is, right? But if you are looking to level up your editing and you're looking to, make money with video, then you really have to consider a professional style of editing platform.
Yeah, and there's three main ones when you get to that level, which is like she said, when you're get the level where you're going to be making a living doing it and get paid to do it. There's three main platforms that are out there, and that's what we're going to talk about today, these three. So the first one's Adobe Premiere, second one's Final Cut Pro, and the third is DaVinci Resolve.
Yep.
Yeah.
And throughout his years of filming, I can attest to the growing pains that he has had through different editing softwares that he's used. There's nothing worse than, having something crash on you or, just like needing to hit a deadline and there being some pretty big glitches and whatnot. Of course, there's pros and cons to each, so that's what we're going to explore. But we're going to talk to you about each one, and hopefully you'll get a feel for what's going to be right for you and your filming. So program number one.
Yeah, program number one is Final Cut Pro. And, Final Cut Pro has been around a long time. So they first came out in 1998, and they became at one point, I think 49 to 50% in the early 2000s in the industry was using Final Cut. It's pretty amazing. So it's made by Apple, and in 2011, they decided to make a pivotal change to what they call nonlinear editor and introduce what they called the magnetic timeline. So it's where, if you've ever edited with it, stuff kind of snaps together.
Yes.
So a lot of people didn't like it when it first came out. Yeah, it was pretty controversial. But back in the early 2000s, though, Apple was very creator focused, and they had a lot of apps for free in their ecosystem. Like, you'll remember GarageBand was one that came out, and that was kind of like a watered down version of Logic Pro, which was their professional editing program. And then on the video side, you had iMovie. So iMovie was launched in 1999. I remember editing projects for my degree, which was actually in music, editing music for music teaching projects in iMovie on those old iMacs. Remember the iMacs that had the color?
Oh yes, the shell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
shell. Yeah. I remember using iMovie on those,
yeah,
which was, a simpler version ultimately of what became Final Cut Pro. And that's how I got started, was editing those films. And then in 2011, when I became more serious about video editing, I was looking for something more powerful than
yeah,
iMovie. That was right when they switched to Final Cut
yeah,
Pro and the magnetic timeline and all that. And it was
yeah.
pretty, and I see why they did it, because it was a very seamless transition
Mm-hmm.
from going from iMovie to a professional program like Final Cut Pro.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's like it's a really strong and robust platform now. It's
Yep.
grown and has been really great. And it was great for you for many years,
Mm-hmm.
Um we're gonna get into the pros and the best features of Final Cut Pro. And the first one we have is there's no subscription. You pay once and you own it. And that's a really big deal to us, because if you're, a hungry filmmaker that's just getting started out, the price is 300 and that's one and done. That's
Yep.
important. You aren't going to
Yep.
have this recurring fee. You own it. You move forward. You paid for it like what, one time when you first started?
In 2011.
Yep.
I haven't paid for it since.
That's amazing, right? The learning curve is supposed to be really easy on that, especially if you've been in the Apple ecosystem and you're familiar with Apple or you're using a Mac. It's a great fit for that. It'll feel really familiar and fluid, and that transition can't be understated, right? And then it's pretty concise. There's, a lot of other programs that can be overwhelming with the amount of options. And I think that's what Apple really has dialed in all of their platforms. It's intuitive, it's concise. You can get to where you need to be in a fairly short amount of time.
Yeah, it's a very clean user interface, which
Yes.
is what they're known for. And if you're not coming from one of the legacy, programs like
Right.
Avid or, the Premiere or whatever, then you won't have those I don't know what you call it, reflexes built in for those other editors.
Sure.
And so if you don't have that, then it does feel very intuitive
Yep.
coming.
Nice clean slate.
Yeah.
It's a good option. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing too is that it's fast. So, since it's designed, like we said, Apple has Apple has an ecosystem, and since they do have an ecosystem, they can design the software to work specifically on only the software that Apple has available. And so
Right.
it's easy to make things very efficient and fast, and especially on the new Apple Silicon, like the M2 and M3 chips. I mean, I've just seen, some speed stuff where it's really, really
Yeah.
fast, even with 8K, doing multiple 8K, footage streams. It's
Yeah.
just, it's really fast.
Which
yeah.
makes for really good efficiency. Yeah.
Yep. And then finally, the pros on Final Cut Pro is the Apple ProRes is an Apple codec, so it runs natively on there, and it's kind of a big deal because it's a very seamless integration. Because in your timeline is a form of ProRes, and you can export in ProRes really
Right.
easily. Where on other, machines, specifically for DaVinci Resolve, you need to be on an Apple machine in order to export ProRes.
Yep.
And even then, you're not dealing natively in Apple ProRes. So it's a nice, feature that Final Cut Pro is natively ProRes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then we'll jump into the cons a little bit here, and just like, the pro of having this amazing ecosystem. If you're not an Apple user, if you don't have a Mac, it's really probably not a great platform for you, right? It needs to be shared across different editors, and other people might not have those ecosystems to work with. And so if you're sending it off like that, they're going to have a different experience with what you're working with, and you might have a different.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to need Apple hardware
Yep.
in order to collaborate with you on a project.
Yep.
And not everyone, has invested in that. And
Yeah.
so if you have a team or you're working across a project, it makes it much harder to collaborate, because they would have to
Right.
go out and buy an Apple computer in order to
Right.
work with you on your Final Cut Pro project. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with the raw compatibility, right? There's, they've added in like the raw codecs, like Red, and really talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, they've gotten better over the years. Initially, there was no raw compatibility when they launched in 2011, and it took them a while to get that. And so they got the Red Code raw. Finally, you used to have a plugin with that. I forget who made that, but there used to be a plugin where you can kind of get around that. But even now, like the B raw, which is what I shoot in on my Blackmagic cinema cameras, and they don't natively support B-roll. So yeah, again, you have to get another plugin, which is more money, and sometimes there's bugs if one updates before the other and all that kind of stuff. And it's just an extra unknown and hassle to kind of deal with. So that's one con.
And when you have like the wonderful aspect of it is it's very concise, it's very simplified and straightforward, but that also can lead to fewer features, right?
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people will say that Final Cut Pro is not a professional program, and I would disagree. There have been feature films that have been done on it. It's not the first choice in Hollywood, in my understanding, but you can do, famously MKBHD, his channel, he edits all his red footage in Final Cut Pro, and he has since I think whole time on his channel, and he still does, and they're putting out a lot of content. So it is a professional editor, but there's a lot of, when you get into more specific exports though, there's not as many options. And, also when you're color grading, for example, a lot of people, DaVinci Resolve famously has the best color grader on
we'll get to that.
Market. Yeah, it's coming up here.
Spoiler.
But if you want to, take a Final Cut project and do it in Resolve, your only option is to export, like a high, like a ProRes file, and then work on it and then send it back into Final Cut. And that's it's an extra step. It's longer, more, it's more complex. So, just changes your workflow, and it's something I'm not a fan of. So,
sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next big hitter platform that we're going to talk about, you've probably heard of, maybe you've already encountered it, is Adobe Premiere. It is, I think, kind of a maybe mixed bag for Nathan, right? Like that I've experienced you having some struggles with. So, they're one of the three majors, right? You've experienced all of them. We have friends and colleagues that swear by their software, right? But we got to be transparent. Nathan has like this love-hate relationship with Adobe, and we want to be fair in sharing the pros and cons.
We'll try. We'll try to be fair. I'll say that. I'll try to be fair.
I'll try to let you know if you're getting, So let us get into some of the best aspects of Adobe first, because it's a mammoth, right? It has a lot to offer. It has a lot of complementary programs, and it has a less complex version even to offer a good starting point, right?
Yeah, so it really is, like you said, I have some friends and colleagues that swear by Adobe Premiere. Like Adobe Premiere Pro is their bread and butter, and that's how they make a living, editing and projects in that software. And it really is it's an industry standard for a reason, because there's a lot of options when it comes to what you can do and how you can tweak footage in there. But but a thing to remember is that edit, especially effects, right? After Effects is kind of the industry standard, and it works within that that ecosystem. So the second thing, so first is industry standard. And these are the pros, by the way, right? So, and the second is their ecosystem. So their ecosystem is, namely, so Adobe Premiere, you have Adobe After Effects, you have Audition, and a handful of, even with Photoshop, it can send stuff back and forth. And so it works really well going back and forth between the files talk to each other. You have Adobe Creative Cloud to store stuff in. So the ecosystem is a strong element of that, even though it's very expensive.
A lot of capability. We'll get to that.
Yeah, I know. We'll get there. All right, and the third one is Premiere Rush. So Premiere Rush is kind of like their less featured version for video editing to kind of get stuff out the door. And it's great that they kind of offer that trajectory into more professional editing for people that need to do, lighter,
it's a good entry
edits.
point.
Yeah, it's a good entry point.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, you saw how hard it was for Nathan to get through the pros of Adobe, so we know how he feels. Prepare yourself, folks. And we really want to know your experience, too. This is a good place for us to just remind you, you might sense that bias. We'd love to hear about yours. You can always email us at podcast@slabvisuals.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you could comment. So, Nate, you are now welcome to take it away on the cons of Adobe Premiere.
Okay, well, subscriptions, right? And I put that in my notes in all caps and all bold because I'm sure there's a lot of you listening or watching, you probably have subscription fatigue is what I call it at this point because everything has gone almost everything, I should say, has gone to that subscription model. And I just, over the years with Adobe, like I really, it's kind of led, they've done this since what, 2004,
I don't
was
even
it
know. They've been
14
around a long time.
when they switched the subscription model, but they've become the butt of like jokes and memes for over a decade now.
It's a really frustrating thing
and for
to encounter.
yeah, for a reason. So looking specifically like at numbers, like currently Premiere Pro is $22.99 a month, so $23 a month, and that's only one user per license. Which if you look at Final Cut, that's a one-time payment of $299, and if you look at DaVinci Resolve Studio, so that's their studio version, they are $295, again, one time. So if I look back, when I paid for Final Cut Pro back in 2011, I paid my $300, and so
soapbox alert.
well, after 13 months, you've already paid, of paying for Adobe Premiere Pro, you've already paid for any of those other editing software. So, doing the math, like, for just Final Cut Pro, the time from 2011 till now, if I would have had Premiere Pro, and let's say you average $20 a month, because I think it used to be $20 subscription price, I would have paid $2,880 in that time, right? For that software. So if I subtract the $300 I paid for Final Cut Pro, that would have left me $2,580 to spend on other stuff in my video business, whether it be lenses or cameras or lights or other
professional development, anything.
Anything. So and that's a big deal to up and coming filmmaker. That amount of money is a big deal. So the second thing on the cons is crashes, and I'm sure that if any of you listening or watching have used Premiere Pro, in my experience it's been a crash fest. And this is even on a computer that's spec'd out like the one behind me. If you're watching, it's like back there. I took a Mac. I'm kind of proud of that. A Mac G5. I don't know if you can see it. A Mac G5, one of the old Mac Pro G5s, and gutted it and put like a AMD Threadripper system board in there, like all custom. And anyway, so I maxed out 23080s in there and everything, and it was just a crash fest. So it wasn't my computer. It was the software, and I've had other friends report similar things. So. You
have 30 seconds left to complain about Adobe. All right. Off.
All right. So the first one is it's complicated, and complicated in saying that, yes, it's powerful, but it's very complicated as far as menus. So there's a lot of stuff that it's inherited from its legacy, because it's been around a long time too. And so they've kind of left things where they are because of legacy users have gotten used to that in the reflex of where that is. And so it makes the learning curve much steeper for new users. Again, they have Adobe Rush, which is great, but the learning curve is still pretty high. And then if you didn't, start in the Adobe ecosystem and didn't cut your teeth on at a studio that used Adobe, it's a lot harder to
familiarize yourself with and get proficient at. Okay.
Get up to speed.
Okay.
I'm done.
We're done with the cons because it's a mammoth and it has a lot of capability. Especially in like the After Effects and stuff like that. Like it's a really
an industry
great
standard,
program.
and
for a reason. Yes, definitely. All right. The final program that we're going to talk about in the top 3 industry is DaVinci Resolve Studio. And we're talking about the studio version because that's what we use. And we use it for a reason. So again, you're going to just hear our bias towards that. DaVinci, the color grading software itself has been around for a long time. It's been in the cinema industry. It has been the cinema industry standard, and it was acquired by Blackmagic Design. And you use a Blackmagic camera, right? Is that the same Blackmagic Design, right?
Yeah.
They're into cameras. That's pretty significant, right? Since then, they've added a compositor, and that's their competitor to the Adobe After Effects. And then they also added Audio Editor, which is the competitor to Adobe's Audition, right?
Yeah,
so they have some really bulky, heavy lifting good stuff. This makes DaVinci a really solid one-stop editing program, right?
Yeah. And I've been on DaVinci a couple years, but I wish I would have switched sooner. So before that, I was Final Cut Pro, and then I would do projects on Adobe
Mm-hmm.
Premiere when it came up. So yeah, and it is, in my experience, the most feature-rich software in one package
Yes.
that's available to
Yeah.
filmmakers, in my opinion.
So that we haven't even gotten into the pros yet. Here
Yep.
we go with the pros. It's, the pros for DaVinci Resolve Studio are paramount for professional filming or editing, and it has the power. It's reasonably priced. They know cameras and have some awesome add-on features. So tell us a little bit about the power of this program.
Well,
Our
yeah, I
first pro.
mean, like I said, the to me the power in it, like it's a great editor, but the power really comes in having, your compositor, your
Mm-hmm.
color grading, which
Yes.
again is Hollywood standard. DaVinci, like you said
Mm-hmm.
before, just DaVinci itself was a color grading software
Yes.
before Blackmagic acquired it, and it was the standard. And so you have, your color grading, your Fusion, which is your compositor, and your Fairlight, which is your auto editing and your export, all within tabs at the bottom of your
Mm-hmm.
window. And to not have to export or import or go to another program or anything,
Yes.
you can just do it all right there seamlessly is huge. I mean, that's really powerful when you
And
got to
very
knock a
efficient.
project out. Oh
You've
yeah.
got
Hmm.
you don't have tons of time to spend on editing. It's
Yeah.
it's hard. Yeah.
Hmm.
That makes
Yep.
sense. Yeah.
Yep.
The cost, right? We obviously don't care for the subscription model. And so you talked about that a little bit earlier, Um, tell us a little bit about how
Yeah.
you could get that for free even.
Well, yeah, and one thing that they offer, so Blackmagic Design has its heritage in video production, and then since they've made cameras, you have the Pocket Cinema camera, and then studio cameras, and a bunch of different other cameras. And one nice thing is that they offer a full-blown studio DaVinci Resolve Studio license, and that's up to 3 computers per license, for free with their cinema cameras, as well as their color grading, what do you call that? Control surfaces, I think is what they call that. So that's a $300 value that you get for I guess $295 that you get for free with that. And again, that's huge to young filmmakers, is that you only pay for that. So if you pay for it once, or you get it with the camera for free.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they make cameras, right? Like they're camera
Right.
designers, right? So, I mean, who better to know the editing software than the people that, if you're using a Blackmagic camera, this
Well,
is probably a really great
Yeah,
interface.
of the three editing the 3 big editing programs that we're talking about today, they're the only one that also makes filming equipment, right? So Apple makes computers, and Adobe doesn't make computers or cameras, but Blackmagic Design does computers and production equipment, so ATEM switchers and cameras, and a whole host of other control surfaces for color grading, a whole host of other things. And since they have that, they can create a very seamless, line from their cameras into their editing
Yes.
software, and even tethered stuff we'll talk about in a second here with their cloud. But example of that is their B-RAW, right? So Blackmagic RAW, which is their codec that they film natively in the cameras, and it just works beautifully within DaVinci Resolve Studio. And another thing they did, for example, is gyro stabilization, where they had built that into their cameras years ago, but hadn't developed the software on the editing side
Right.
for that yet. And so one day they're like, oh yeah, we finally reached the point where we can turn that on. It's like, now it's available. They didn't charge extra for that.
Yeah.
There was no upsell or anything. It was
Yeah,
just
you didn't
like,
have to pay to activate it or something like that.
yeah. And again, that goes to the company's ethos, but I talk
Yeah.
about that in another episode.
Sure. So talk a little bit about the cloud.
Yeah, the cloud collaboration is it's a pretty big deal. I mean, so Adobe, has their creative cloud, but it's not on the same level as what Blackmagic's doing. Blackmagic is more on the production level side. So one thing you can do is, if you're shooting with their cameras, you can shoot something, have the file upload as a proxy to the cloud real time as you continue shooting. You can do the same thing with I believe with the Blackmagic app on your iPhone. If you have one of the new iPhones and they have the app there and you can shoot ProRes, you can upload a proxy and then share that with editors on your team around the world, and they can start immediately working with that footage, color grading, and everything anywhere around the world. So that ability to collaborate on teams across the planet is like it's a pretty powerful thing.
Sure.
And they've even created just that workflow is it's pretty big. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and then the last one on the pros, and I didn't want to. It kind of seems like a small one, but it's available on Linux. This is the only one of the three again that's available on Linux. So you have Windows, and then you have Apple's, iOS, their OS, and the Mac OS, and then you have Linux, and they're the only one of the three on Linux, which is again, I think it goes back
to Linux,
to their
that matters.
go back to their ethos of being compatible with a lot more platforms and open.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously we're very pleased with DaVinci Resolve Studio, but that doesn't mean it's without its flaws. And so why don't we talk a little bit about the cons of DaVinci Resolve?
Yeah, and I think the learning curve is probably the biggest one that I can think of. They have, there's still days where, even though I've been working with it for years, where I'm hunting for features or I accidentally turn something on by like a random keystroke. That's really, frustrating. So it does have a steep learning curve, but I think they balance that out by the fact that you can download a very powerful version of DaVinci Resolve for free. And you've experienced that a little bit. And basically, it's not a trial version. It's not like you get 7 days or 14 days of a watermarked version. No, this is like you get full-on DaVinci Resolve, including all the color grading, for free. And that it's like 95% of what the full studio program is, with a couple things turned off. But if you're...
I'm laughing. I'm picturing Michael Scott, who names his weaknesses as strengths in his interview.
Right.
Because here we are talking about cons, and you're like boasting about the free version.
My
and how
weakness
awesome
is that I love DaVinci Resolve too hard. Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, no, but that's a big thing. If you're a young filmmaker and you want to learn a professional piece of software,
it's nice to have that free entry point where you don't have to invest a lot. You can fail fast and find out like, this isn't for me, for free, instead of having to
so that when you're ready to jump to the studio version and you need those extra couple of features that they have turned off. I mean, it's not like you're going from iMovie to Final Cut Pro. It's like you are in DaVinci Resolve still, and you just have those extra features turned on, which is, I think, really powerful. Because again, the ability to learn and the amount of tutorials and stuff out there on YouTube is just innumerable. Yeah.
So then there's one issue that I've actually started to experience because I'm learning a little bit about editing in DaVinci, and that's the relinking of files, right? And this is a really oddly specific complaint, isn't it?
Well, it's relevant.
But it's totally relevant. Yeah. I've been frustrated by it. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, anytime, if you're editing on different machines or have different hard drives as we are, and you plug in stuff and you're not editing from proxies in the cloud, you will get a little red thing with a broken link, like a chain looking thing. And when you go to relink files, it should be as easy as pointing it towards the hard drive, and then it figures it out. But
it basically is just a signal that you're going to spend the next 20 minutes trying to figure out how to find your files and relink those.
Specific exact location. And a lot of times it wants the hard drive to have the same letter, C, D, E, F, whatever your hard drive is listed as, the first time that you drug that file into the project.
So we'll be writing a strongly worded note to DaVinci Resolve Studio about figuring out this relinking mess, because it just shouldn't be happening. Okay, talk about like how resource hungry this program is, because it gobbles up a bit.
It does. Yeah. If you have a not as hefty machine, you're going to feel that a little bit on the processing, and a lot of that inefficiency comes from Fusion, which is their compositor program. And that comes down to programming, and from their end. I don't do a ton of compositing day in, day out, so it's not as noticeable
but
in my workflow.
But it'll matter to people that do.
But exactly. If you're really into compositing, so... but there's some things you can do is you can edit from proxies, and you can also turn down your timeline resolution, which are both ways that'll, if you have a computer that's not as robust processing wise, then you can still get around and do what you need to do.
And you can always turn those proxies off when you're done and out. Export it, right? Or does it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll let you export with the proxies on.
So
I
you
think
still
it gives
get
you a warning.
the excellent quality. It's just a workaround, right? Okay, so we got through the cons of our beloved DaVinci Resolve Studio. But before we finish, like the buzzword right now is AI. It's everywhere, and it's going to affect video. Adobe is the leader in editors right now for AI. They just put significant resources towards AI with their Photoshop, and they've already previewed some future Premiere tools, right?
Yeah.
And we even tried that out just on a trial. And naturally, they tried to get us to subscribe, and you had to spend way too much. No, I'm not letting you talk about this because you already were on your soapbox.
Yeah.
But they did try to rope us into paying, even though we just wanted to do the trial, and it was harder than it should have been. What's interesting, though, is Blackmagic Design, you were talking about earlier, kind of had this like already, these reveals of these special things that have happened, like the gyro and stuff like that. And so it's like, what do you suspect might happen? Who do you think will take the lead later on? Do you think it'll be our Blackmagic? Do you think anyone else is there?
I think, I mean, my personal opinion is that, yeah, Adobe has put significant resources towards AI.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot, with, for example, OpenAI just
They
announced
should have
their
the resources.
Sora. Yeah.
The money.
Well, yeah, for that many
Anyway,
subscriptions. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, they've been doing a significant amount of AI with their Photoshop and like you said, they alluded to some of those stuff. And it's interesting. My take is that they will probably be the leader of AI within the video editing realm, but I could totally see Blackmagic either partnering with one of the other, video AI companies, whether it be partnering with OpenAI and making, OpenAI Sora a part of the DaVinci Resolve, like whether it's a tab, not like they have Fusion and Fairlight, there would be like an AI video generation tab. I could 100% see that happening. Or them just acquiring an AI video company like they did with DaVinci. I mean, like I said, DaVinci was a color grading and they acquired them. And same with, Fusion and Fairlight were also their own individual companies that Blackmagic acquired. So I could see them acquiring a company as well. Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, there you have it. This is our take. You got to hear all the pros and cons of the three powerhouses of Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere, and DaVinci Resolve Studio. It's by no means comprehensive. We want to hear from you. You probably have loads of experiences with this, and maybe you are totally about Adobe and we miss some of the like primary pros that are there, and we acknowledge our bias. Go ahead. Tell us about it.
Yeah, if you're watching, put it in the comments below. Or if you're on the podcast, send us an email at podcast@slabvisuals.com. And I'd like to hear your triumphs or horror stories with any and all of the above software that we talked about today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Creating quality video is an art, and you need the right tools, and you just can't get by without really great editing software. So hopefully this was of value to you. We'd love to learn from you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Go out and create something.
Yes.